Harris family living room night. Peter sits on the couch, his cast resting on a pillow. He stares down at the floor, eyes puffy from crying. MR and MRS Harris sit on the other side of the room, barely acknowledging him. The silence is heavy, broken only by the ticking of a clock. MRS Harris, sharply. If you can't be responsible, you'll have to learn the hard way, Peter. No more TV or playing outside until that arm heals. MR Harris, grumbling. And you'll be doing your homework early from now on. No excuses. Peter bites his lip, trying to hold back fresh tears. He turns his gaze to the window, where the faint glow of streetlights beckons to him like a distant dream of freedom. His little fingers tighten on the edge of the couch cushion. Grandma Evelyn, gently. Don't you think he's been through enough? The poor boy needs rest, not more punishment. MRS Harris, curtly. He needs discipline, Mother. That's what he needs. Grandma Evelyn gives her son and daughter-in-law a disapproving look, but says nothing more. She stands, walks over to Peter, and places a soft kiss on his head. Grandma Evelyn whispering, I'll be back to check on you, love. Be brave. Peter nods, still unable to speak. He watches his grandmother leave, her warmth fading from the room. The coldness of his parents' disapproval seeps in. An unexpected friend. Neighborhood street. Afternoon. Days have passed. Peter walks slowly down the street, his cast covered with doodles from classmates. His head hangs low. A ball rolls toward him, stopping at his feet. Peter looks up. MR Dalton cheerfully. Hey, buddy. Mind tossing that back? Peter hesitates, then uses his good arm to pick up the ball. He throws it, and it wobbles awkwardly through the air. MR Dalton grinning. Not bad for a one-handed throw. You got talent, kid. Peter's lips twitch into a small smile. MR Dalton, waving him over. You know, I could use a hand painting my fence. It's boring doing it alone. Want to help? Peter's eyes brighten. No one had asked for his help before. Peter shyly. But I only have one good hand. MR Dalton with a wink. One hand's all you need, partner. Besides, I'm not looking for perfect. Just someone to keep me company. Peter glances back at his house, where his parents' distant figures can be seen through the window. After a moment of thought, he walks over to MR Dalton. Peter softly. Okay, I'll help. Mr. Dalton's backyard. Late afternoon. Peter and MR Dalton work side by side. MR Dalton dips a paintbrush into a can of white paint, while Peter carefully follows his lead with a smaller brush. Specks of paint dot Peter's cast and clothes, but he doesn't care. He's smiling. MR Dalton casually. I had a broken arm once too, you know. Took me a while to stop feeling sorry for myself. Peter glances at him, surprised. Peter curious. Did your parents get mad at you? MR Dalton pauses, tapping the brush against the rim of the can. He looks at Peter thoughtfully. MR Dalton gently. No, kid. My parents weren't perfect, but they knew life's got a way of knocking you down sometimes. It's getting back up that counts. Sounds to me like you're doing that already. Peter feels a warmth in his chest, something he hasn't felt in a while. He nods and focuses on his painting. A new light. Harris family dining room. Night. Dinner is quiet. Peter sits with his parents, his fingers fidgeting under the table. His cast is dotted with fresh white paint. MRS Harris, eyeing his cast. What is that on your arm? Paint? Peter freezes. His heart races. MRS Harris, irritated. Peter, I swear, you can't go a single day without causing trouble. Look at you. Filthy. MR Harris, frowning. Where have you been, Peter? Peter opens his mouth but hesitates. He looks down, unsure whether to answer. Peter softly. I was helping Mr. Dalton paint his fence. MRS Harris, crossing her arms. Helping? More like getting in the way. Silence hangs in the air. Peter feels the weight of their disapproval again, heavier than ever. But this time, something is different. He remembers MR Dalton's words. Peter, quietly, but firmly. I did a good job. Both parents stop eating, stunned by his defiance. Grandma Evelyn, who has been quietly watching, breaks into a slow, proud smile. Grandma Evelyn softly. Yes, you did, darling. Yes, you did. Peter's bedroom, day. Peter sits on the edge of his bed, staring at his cast. The quiet hum of the house presses down on him. He runs his fingers over the rough surface of the cast, tracing the blank, white space. No signatures. No doodles. Just emptiness. He glances at the door, slightly ajar. Voices echo faintly from the living room. Mrs. Harris, muffled, irritated. He's always causing problems. First the broken vase, now this. Mr. Harris, grumbling. The hospital bills alone? We can't keep bailing him out. Peter's eyes water, but he quickly rubs his face, trying to be strong like his father always says. He picks up a crayon from his desk and starts drawing on the cast. He sketches a small house with a sun and a stick figure standing outside, smiling. He stares at the figure, and his face crumples. He presses his forehead against his knees, his small shoulders shaking. A flicker of warmth. Peter's bedroom. Night. The room is dark, lit only by a dim night light shaped like a rocket ship. Footsteps creak softly outside the door. There's a light knock. Grandma Evelyn whispering, "Peter, darling, it's me." The door creaks open. Grandma Evelyn steps in, her gray hair tied in a loose bun, her kind eyes scanning the room. She sees him curled up on the bed, pretending to sleep. Grandma Evelyn softly, "I know you're awake, sweet pea." Peter sniffles and slowly turns his head toward her. His face is streaked with dried tears. Peter, voice cracking, "They don't want me here, Grandma." Grandma Evelyn's heart breaks a little. She sits on the edge of the bed and pulls him close, her arms warm and firm around him. Grandma Evelyn, soothing. "Listen to me, Peter. The world can be cold sometimes, and people can say things they don't mean. But you are loved. Do you hear me? You are so loved." Peter muffled, "But not by them." Grandma Evelyn pauses, stroking his hair gently. Grandma Evelyn sighing. "People have their flaws, darling. Your parents, they're not always right. But I see you. I see how strong you are, how kind you are. And one day, they will too." Peter hugs her tighter. Harris kitchen, morning asterisk. Peter sits at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal. His casted arm makes it hard for him to hold the spoon properly. He spills milk on the table. Mrs. Harris, sharply, "Watch it, Peter. Clean that up before it stains." She tosses him a paper towel without looking up from her phone. Mr. Harris sits at the table, sipping coffee while flipping through the newspaper. He doesn't glance at Peter. Peter tries to wipe up the milk with his one good hand, but the cast gets in the way. The more he tries, the bigger the mess becomes. Tears start to pool in his eyes, but he fights them back. Peter whispering, "I'm sorry." Mr. Harris sighing, "Sorry doesn't fix anything, Peter." Grandma Evelyn enters the kitchen, her sharp eyes scanning the scene. She walks over, picks up a towel, and kneels next to Peter. Grandma Evelyn calmly, "Here, love, let me help you." She helps him clean up the milk while Mrs. Harris and Mr. Harris exchange looks. Mr. Harris clears his throat, but says nothing. Grandma Evelyn firmly, "If you're going to raise a child, the least you can do is offer a little patience." Mrs. Harris shoots her a glare. Mrs. Harris, curtly, "Don't start, mother." Grandma Evelyn glances at Peter, her eyes full of quiet defiance. Grandma Evelyn, whispering to Peter, "Keep your head up, darling. They'll see you one day. I promise." Peter nods, his gaze fixed on the towel in his lap. Neighborhood street, late afternoon. Peter sits on the curb outside his house, drawing in the dirt with a stick. His cast rests on his lap, freshly decorated with small, colorful drawings he added himself. The sound of a bicycle bell rings out. Peter glances up to see Mr. Dalton riding down the street on his bike. Mr. Dalton skids to a stop in front of him. Mr. Dalton grinning. "That's some serious art you got on that cast, buddy. You an artist?" Peter shrugs, still drawing in the dirt. Peter quietly, "Just doodles." Mr. Dalton chuckling. "Doodles, huh? Looks like masterpieces to me. Bet you could sell that cast for a fortune." Peter glances at him, unsure if he's joking. Mr. Dalton kneels down, resting his arms on his knees. Mr. Dalton seriously, "No, really. I mean it. You got talent, kid. People pay big bucks for art like that." Peter's eyes widen. Peter, hopeful. "Really?" Mr. Dalton grinning. "Really. I'd buy it right now if I could." But then you'd be walking around with no arm, and I can't have that on my conscience. Peter cracks a small smile. Mr. Dalton, tell you what, I got a fence I'm repainting. You want to help me out? I could use a pro artist like you to add a little flair to it. Peter hesitates, glancing back at the house. Peter quietly, my parents don't like it when I leave. Mr. Dalton tilts his head. Mr. Dalton gently. I'm just next door, kid. You're not running away. You're creating something. There's a big difference. After a moment, Peter nods. The walk of stories. The sun filters through the trees, casting soft rays of light on the dirt path. Peter and Mr. Dalton walk side by side. Peter keeps his eyes on the ground, occasionally kicking pebbles out of his way. Mr. Dalton strolls with his hands in his pockets, whistling a soft tune. Mr. Dalton grinning. You know, I used to come down this trail all the time when I was your age. Thought I'd find buried treasure. Peter glances up, curious. Peter tilting his head. Did you find any? Mr. Dalton smirks, glancing at Peter with a wink. Mr. Dalton. Oh, I found plenty of treasure. Old bottle caps, rusty nails, and one time, I found a key. I spent weeks looking for the lock it belonged to. Never found it. Peter smiles a little, his fingers brushing against the bark of a tree as they walk. Peter quietly. Maybe it was a magic key. Mr. Dalton raises an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Mr. Dalton grinning. A magic key? Now that's an idea. What do you think it unlocked? Peter shrugs, but thinks for a moment. Peter, imaginative. Maybe a secret door. One that only opens for people who feel alone. Mr. Dalton stops walking and looks at him, his expression softening. Mr. Dalton gently. I think you're onto something, kid. They continue walking. For the first time in a long while, Peter feels seen. Grassy field day. They reach a wide, open field where dandelions sway in the breeze. Mr. Dalton sits on a large rock and pats the spot next to him. Peter sits, hugging his knees. Mr. Dalton curious. So, what's going on at home, partner? You've been awfully quiet about it. Peter's gaze shifts to the dandelions. He picks one, turning it over in his hands. Peter, hesitant. My parents, they're mad at me. They think I'm a problem. He picks at the petals, avoiding eye contact. Mr. Dalton nodding. That's a heavy thing for a kid to carry. Peter, voice cracking. I didn't mean to fall, you know? I didn't mean to break my arm. But now they look at me like I broke more than just my bones. Tears begin to form in his eyes, but he quickly wipes them away with his sleeve. Mr. Dalton takes a deep breath, looking out over the field. Mr. Dalton, thoughtful. You know, people get scared when things break. They think broken things aren't as good as new ones. But me? I think broken things have the most interesting stories. Peter looks up at him, puzzled. Peter sniffles. How? Mr. Dalton picks up a dandelion and blows on it, the seeds floating away in the breeze. Mr. Dalton smiling. Well, take this little guy. People see a broken dandelion. They think it's useless. But look at it now. It's sending its pieces everywhere, starting new dandelions all over the place. Pretty clever for something people call a weed, huh? Peter watches the seeds float through the air, his eyes following them like they're little ships on an invisible sea. Peter whispering, so, being broken doesn't mean you're done? Mr. Dalton grinning. Not even close, partner. It means you're just getting started. The return home, asterisk, asterisk. The sun dips low in the sky, painting the neighborhood in warm shades of orange and pink. Mr. Dalton walks Peter up to his front door. Peter shifts nervously, glancing at the house, as if it might swallow him whole. Peter quietly. They're gonna be mad I was gone. Mr. Dalton, squatting to his level. Maybe, but you've got to know something, Peter. Just 'cause people are mad, doesn't mean you're wrong. You did something good today. Peter tilts his head. Mr. Dalton smiling. You took a walk. You talked about things. You're stronger than you think, kid. Peter smiles softly, nodding. Peter small but firm. Yeah, I am. Mr. Dalton grinning. That's the spirit, partner. They bump fists. Mr. Dalton watches him go inside before turning and walking back down the street. Seeds of trust. Mr. Dalton's workshop day. The soft hum of a radio plays old rock music in the background. Sunlight filters through the window, illuminating the floating dust particles in the air. The room smells of sawdust and fresh pine. Mr. Dalton stands at a workbench, wearing a plaid shirt and a tool belt. Peter sits on a stool, watching as Mr. Dalton carefully sands down a block of wood. His eyes follow every movement, fascinated. Mr. Dalton grinning. See this, partner? The trick is patience. You can't rush a smooth edge. Gotta feel it out. He hands Peter a small block of wood and a piece of sandpaper. Mr. Dalton encouraging. Here, give it a try. Slow and steady, like you're petting a sleepy cat. Peter chuckles, taking the sandpaper. He rubs it against the wood, frowning at first. Mr. Dalton watches him closely. Peter concentrating. It's rough. Feels bumpy. Mr. Dalton nodding. That's 'cause it's not done yet. Keep going. Things don't get smooth right away, partner. They take time. Peter works in silence, his little hands moving with more care now. Slowly, he begins to feel the difference. Peter grinning. It's getting soft. Mr. Dalton chuckling. See? Told you. People are a lot like wood, Peter. Sometimes they're rough around the edges. But with patience, they get smoother too. Peter looks up at Mr. Dalton, thinking deeply about his words. The Garden of Hope. A small patch of garden stretches before them. Tomatoes hang from vines, sunflowers sway in the breeze, and rows of carrots peek from the soil. Mr. Dalton kneels in the dirt, his hands covered in soil as he pulls weeds from around a tomato plant. Peter crouches beside him, watching intently. Peter curious. Why do we have to pull them out? They're just plants too. Mr. Dalton grinning. True, but weeds don't play nice. They take up space, hog the water, and leave no room for the good stuff to grow. He hands Peter a small trowel. Mr. Dalton, your turn. See that one there? It's a sneaky one. Get it by the roots. Peter grips the trowel, digging around the base of the weed. His tongue sticks out in concentration as he wiggles it free. Peter grinning. Got it? Mr. Dalton nodding. Nice work, partner. The tomatoes are thanking you. Peter sits back on his heels, wiping sweat from his brow. He stares at the neat garden, proud of his effort. Peter thoughtful. So, people have weeds too? Mr. Dalton tilts his head, wiping his hands on his jeans. Mr. Dalton smiling. Oh yeah, weeds like doubt, fear, and bad memories. They try to take over your mind if you let them, but if you face them, pull them out by the roots, well, then you leave room for something good to grow. Peter looks down at his hands, dirt under his fingernails, and smiles. Peter quietly. I think I've got some weeds I need to pull. Mr. Dalton grinning. Don't we all, kid? Don't we all? Building something new. Mr. Dalton's workshop. Late afternoon. Mr. Dalton stands over Peter, who now wears a small apron that says Junior Builder on the front. Mr. Dalton hands him a small hammer. Mr. Dalton playfully. You ready, big shot? This is the real deal. No wobbly nails on my watch. Peter giggles, gripping the hammer tightly. In front of him is a simple birdhouse, the pieces already cut but not assembled. Mr. Dalton. All right, line up the nail with the mark. Hold it steady. Tap it once, then twice. Not too hard, or it'll bend. Peter's eyes narrow with focus. He raises the hammer, taps the nail gently. It wobbles. He tries again, and it finally sinks into the wood. Peter grinning wide. I did it. I did it. Mr. Dalton grinning back. Of course you did. You think I'd hand this job to just anyone? Nope. Only the best of the best. They finished the birdhouse together, each nail bringing more confidence to Peter's hands. By the end, Peter gazes at it like it's a masterpiece. Peter beaming. Can we paint it? Mr. Dalton smiling. Heck yeah, we can. I've got every color you can think of. Pick two, partner. Peter's eyes light up. Peter excited. Blue and yellow. Like the sky and the sun. A family divided. Tension at the table. Harris household. Dining room. Evening. The clinking of forks on plates fills the quiet room. The dim chandelier light casts long shadows on the walls. The dinner table is set neatly with matching plates and silverware, but there's no warmth in the atmosphere. Mr. Harris cuts his steak methodically, his brow furrowed as if the meat had personally offended him. Mrs. Harris scrolls on her phone between bites, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. Peter sits quietly at the end of the table, slowly pushing peas around on his plate. Mrs. Harris, coldly. That neighbor of yours is a bad influence, Peter. Always filling your head with silly ideas. Peter's fork pauses midair. He looks up at her, eyes wide but silent. Mr. Harris, nodding firmly. She's right. We've been too lenient. Letting you wander off like that. Unacceptable. Mr. Harris points his knife at Peter like it's an extension of his authority. Mr. Harris, sternly. No more going to Mr. Dalton's. You stay in this house where we can see you. Understood? Peter's heart sinks. He grips his fork tighter, his knuckles turning white. Peter, voice cracking. But he's nice to me. He teaches me stuff. Mrs. Harris's eyes narrow, like a hawk spotting prey. Mrs. Harris, sharply. We are your parents, Peter. Not him. You don't need lessons from strangers. Peter's eyes dart between them, his chest tightening. Peter whispering, You don't teach me anything. The words hang in the air like thunder after lightning. For a moment, everything stops. Mr. Harris puts down his knife. Mrs. Harris slowly lowers her phone, her gaze piercing. Mr. Harris, cold, controlled anger. Excuse me? Peter shrinks back, his eyes locked on his plate, but something inside him stirs. He thinks about the birdhouse, the smooth wood, and the garden full of new growth. Peter, louder, bolder. Mr. Dalton listens to me. He doesn't just tell me I'm a problem. He makes me feel like I'm good at stuff. Mr. Harris's jaw tightens. Mrs. Harris lets out a short, humorless laugh. Mrs. Harris, disdainful. Oh, please. You think hammering nails into wood makes you good at stuff? You don't need praise for doing the bare minimum, Peter. Peter's eyes fill with tears, but he refuses to look away this time. Peter, trembling but firm. It's more than you ever did. Silence. The kind that feels like a storm about to break. Mr. Harris. Voice low, dangerous. Go to your room. Now. Peter stares at them both, his heart pounding in his ears. He pushes his chair back with a loud scrape, his face hot with tears and anger. Peter shaking. I like Mr. Dalton. He doesn't make me feel broken. He runs out of the room, his small feet thudding up the stairs. The slam of his bedroom door echoes through the house. Shelter from the storm. Mr. Dalton's living room. Night. Peter sits on the couch, a warm blanket draped over his shoulders. Mr. Dalton sits next to him, placing a cup of hot cocoa in his hands. The smell of chocolate fills the room, and the steady tick of a clock echoes softly in the background. Mr. Dalton, gently. Want to tell me what's going on? Peter hesitates, staring into his cup. Peter quietly. They hate me. Mr. Dalton's face twists in quiet anger, but he stays calm. Mr. Dalton kindly. I don't think anyone could hate you, partner. Not when they really know you. Peter looking up. They don't know me. They just want me to be quiet and perfect. But I'm not. Mr. Dalton leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Mr. Dalton serious. Nobody's perfect, Peter. Not even your parents. And sometimes, people who feel broken inside don't know how to love the right way. Peter looking down. Then why do I have to be the one who gets hurt? That question hits Mr. Dalton hard. He rubs a hand over his face, sighing deeply. Mr. Dalton softly. You shouldn't have to, partner. But sometimes, life makes you stronger than the people who are supposed to be strong for you. Peter's eyes fill with tears, but this time, he lets them fall. Mr. Dalton gently. You're already tougher than you think, Peter. I've seen it. The way you sand that wood, plant those seeds, hammer those nails, that's strength. No one can take that from you. Peter wipes his face, nodding slowly. Peter sniffles. Can I sleep here tonight? Mr. Dalton smiles softly, patting the couch cushion. Mr. Dalton warmly. I'll grab you a pillow, partner. As Peter settles into the couch, he glances at Mr. Dalton, eyes half closed. Peter whispering, Thanks for seeing me. Mr. Dalton whispering back, Always, kid. Always. The camera lingers on Peter, finally at peace. The glow of the lamp shines on his face as his eyes slowly close.